Welcome to the Equestrian Experience. We're your hosts, Amanda Ross and Bex Mason, and today we're talking to international course designer Paul Connor. Paul is a British show jumping Level 5 course designer and assessor, FEI Level 3 course designer and British Horse Society Level 5 course designer. He's designed in Hong Kong and Portugal and for many major international events, including Nations Cup at Hickstead, Horse of the Year Show and Land Rover Horse Trials. So I'm really looking forward to having this chat with Paul today and be able to get as much information about show jumping course designing as you can. So good morning, Paul. How are you?
Morning. I'm very good. Thank you, Bex. Amanda, nice to see you.
Great. Oh, so happy to have you on today. We've been wanting to have you on for a little while, and I know eventually we've managed to make everyone's diaries sync. So hopefully we can get all the information that's going to help us ride better courses and give our horses a better chance to develop properly on the show jumping track.
Hopefully.
I tell you what, I'm going to be getting as much information from you as possible out of this podcast. So should we just start from the beginning then, Paul? Do you want to just give us a little introduction for how you got into course designing? Because I know it's not a usual job, but it's something, that is vital to our sport.
Yeah, no problem. I've been sort of course designing for 23 years now. So I started in 2000 with Alan Oliver, the great Alan Oliver. He was the sort of first guy I went actually to a show with. But prior to that, I'd competed quite a lot, competed up to sort of like international level myself. And I had a little string of horses, which unfortunately through injury and age and things like that started to retire to stud. I had a couple of stallions at the time. And then I thought, well, actually, I quite enjoy sort of like the theory behind it and sort of putting it into practice and sort of training and all stuff like that. And then Alan said to me, well, why don't you come to Royal Cornwall and just sort of see what it's all like there, really, behind the scenes. So I did, and that was it, really. And off I went.
And off you went.
And off I went.
And what age were you then? Did you decide to stop riding, or did you incorporate your riding into learning how to course design?
Yeah, so I was sort of like in my 30s then, so it was quite a while ago now, obviously. And then, yeah, I decided that, trying to sort of like compete at sort of like grade A level, if you like, and sort of like that level with sort of like the horses that I had. And then I had some very, very good owners that basically bought some youngsters. So concentrated a little bit more on the youngsters, and then sort of started to think, well, actually, I quite enjoyed the course building and going around to the shows, and started in Cornwall, and then basically progressed through there. And then the way that our system works is that you sort of like start as an assistant, and then you work your way up to what is now a level 5, which took obviously a few years to do that, but I kept competing sort of where I could, and then I bought a couple of 3-year-olds from Holland myself, which I've still got one now. He's 21, he's retired, but he sort of jumped up to sort of 130 level, and sort of like advanced medium dressage quite happily. And then so I kept it going as much as I can or could. And then obviously now sort of like I don't ride and compete so much, but I still ride a little bit.
Well, I think that's really interesting. I think your experience of having horses and producing horses must really influence your eye on course designing, and it probably made it quite clear. Do you think when you were learning about it, it made it a little bit easier that you'd already ridden a lot of courses on these horses?
Yeah, I think what it did is it gave me sort of like a feel of like flowing courses. So I think, whenever you're sort of designing a track, rhythm, balance, tempo, so all the basics that you would have as a rider, you sort of think about that when you're building courses. Obviously in a smaller arena, things come up a bit quicker. In a bigger arena, but it's the same principle. Like thinking about sort of like horses turning on a sort of like a 20-meter arc. So keeping that sort of thing, and then relating that to like, well, what would you, how would you do that in a school or an arena when you're riding? It's a 20-meter circle. So it's the same principle really. From that point of view, but when you go up the grades with the course designing, you can sort of like reduce that to sort of 15 because the horses are more experienced, etc. But yeah, generally I think having that rhythm and feeling like what, how would that ride? If I was actually on a horse, would I ride it? And
Yeah.
sort of those sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I find it really interesting when I do walk courses, for like the younger horses or for the most experienced horses. So I've obviously jumped the younger horses and produced them on, and also jumped some bigger, more international classes. And the difference is just amazing. I mean, between the technicality and the time and how fast you've got to go. But what do you think for our listeners is the most important things a rider should keep in mind when they're walking the course? Like riders at different levels approach a course walk like in many different ways. Do you have some tips or tricks for riders?
I think, when you look at the course, there's always a course plan sort of outside the arena before you go in. So have a look at that,
Mm,
because sometimes it gives you the information that you might need to know. So if it's a jump off class, there might be an additional line in a jump off. If it's a single phase, look to see where the timers are, where the changeover is, etc. Because again, it's the whole picture of the course. So that gives you a bit of an idea before you go in. And then look at the course as a whole. Like each fence is individual, but it's a sequence. There's a sequence of fences. You might have ridden the first class and say, for example, number 4 and 5 might be on a straight line on 6 strides. But then in the next class, it might be sort of 8 and 9 on a straight line. And that is going to be slightly different to how you ride it, because obviously it could be in the second phase or the jump off. But I think, think about the relationship from one fence to another. And one thing, like, I always sort of like learn as a rider, and particularly riding sort of Alan Oliver's tracks, his courses, you know, once you're over the first fence, if you stay in a balanced rhythm, maintaining the correct tempo, thinking about your lines, looking where you're going, planning ahead, the horse can't walk the course, whereas you can. So where the next fence is, where the horse is relying on you. So, think about the relationship from the first fence to the last fence and how you're going to sort of approach everything.
that's a really nice way of putting it. And I love the idea that you just said, the horses can't walk the course. And that's something I say to people as well, because, I walk the course, I do my little visualization, how it's going to ride, what I'm going to do. But actually, your horse is going in completely blind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all down to you as a rider to be able to rebalance and make sure you're straight and you're keeping in that rhythm. And obviously, there's things that are thrown in, like they might have a spook or they might
Yeah.
suddenly shoot off because there's a noise or something like that. And those are all things that we can't predict. But what we can predict is the course and how we're going to try and get to those fences in those nice rhythms, just give them the best chance we can, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are your key considerations when you're planning a course?
I think there's a lot. I mean, there is a lot of considerations, but I think generally speaking, what I would probably say is that when look at the level of the competition, level of the show. So I mean, if it's we run an awful lot of classes here where we sort of run from what we call our British novice, which is like 90 centimeters through to 130, and they run under single phase. So if it's a show like that, to me, that's like a sort of a training novice show, where, a lot of people might be bringing their youngsters out for the first time. So in that, if I was sort of like thinking about that, I would be looking for clear rounds. I don't look to sort of try and think, well, actually, I only want
Yeah.
50% clear. If everybody goes clear, and they've sort of ridden the track well, and the horses have jumped well, and the people have enjoyed themselves, then to me, that's what it's about, producing horses,
Yeah.
and, riders for the future, but again, I think when you go up the levels, sometimes the height, the technicality, that sort of sorts out the clear rounds, if you like. Like, for example, if
Yeah.
you're, when you sort of like start jumping like a 140 class, then obviously that's when distance questions come in, probably color, those sort of questions will come in, and they will automatically reduce the number of clear rounds anyway. So I sort of, when I
Yeah.
design, I don't, at novice level, I would say I would be designing to try and get clear rounds.
It always fascinates me when I do see, at the moment here in England, we're going into the second round classes for like the newcomers and the fox hunters, and the qualifying classes. And it always fascinates me with the course builders how you can have 120 in a class and they can whittle it down. I'm not quite sure what the number is, Paul. You might have to correct me here, but is it like they're looking to have 30% of clears to go into the next round?
Yeah, so roughly a third.
Yeah, roughly about 30%.
Yeah. But again, if you've got a class of 120, that can go either way. You can have like 50 or 60 clear and think, oh no. But generally, again, I think when you're with the qualifiers that you're talking about, you've got 3 rounds. So, the first round is sort of like, about, getting people round, and sort of the second round you can use a little bit more height because you obviously, and then you can again reduce the number that way. But again, I think you've still got the third round, which is still, again, sort of a table A class is about jumping. So even in a jump off of a table A class, it's still about jumping. It's not just about speed.
Is it quite nerve-wracking for you as a course builder when you've built a course to watch them go round the first few horses, especially because you did the Nations Cup at Hickstead? How was that when you watched the first few horses going around there?
That was very very nerve-wracking. I think again, I think the whole thing was sort of like a nerve-wracking thing. But again, I think when you're sort of you're working with sort of like 4 or 5-star riders and horses, that the horses, they've gone through the levels to get to that point. The riders have been through the levels to get to that point. So part of that is like, oh, where do I pitch this? Sort of like, it's not taken away, but it's it's slightly easier sometimes, I think, than building like a newcomer second round, where you've got sort of a lot of 120, which is various different ages of horses and levels of horses, etc. But I think generally speaking, I think
levels of riders as well.
Exactly, yeah. So whereas the Nations Cup, it was really good, and it was a really sort of proud moment for me, and I sort of like felt really privileged to be able to actually design it and build it. But you've also got that level. You have a very, very good team of people around you as well that sort of like are working with you. Again, it's the ring, everybody from the ring crew to assistant course designers. I mean, like it's amazing, really. Amazing feeling, but very nerve-wracking.
They've all got yeah, but they've all got your back. Everybody wants you to succeed, don't they? Everybody wants it to be a great day and have a good day's jumping. So I guess you're all on the same page.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, like I was lucky enough that sort of had, obviously I had Bob Ellis, and Kelvin Bywater as my assistant. So I had very, obviously two very, very experienced people to sort of as assistants. But so yeah, it was lovely. I mean, it was really good, and it was
fantastic. So with the difference in heights, I know we were just kind of touching on that a little bit. We talked about the 3-round competitions. So here in England, we've got classes which run as single phase, which will be fence 1 to 6 is, well, actually, Paul, do you want to explain? Because I probably won't explain it right.
So yeah, so we run what we call single phase.
Our different types of classes.
Internationally, it's called 2-phase still. 2-phase special, we tend to call it. So basically, you jump the first. It's actually 5 to 7 fences. So there's 12, 13 fences overall, and then that can be sort of depending on where you do. But generally speaking, it's the first 6 fences, and then the time section starts after. So we have a lot of classes like that in the UK, and internationally, sort of under FEI rules, they have a lot of them now. So they are sort of getting more popular. Do you have them in Australia?
Yeah, we do. They're not that popular, but I probably think we don't have the amount of numbers that you guys do. So is it the kind of thing where you can just keep the classes rolling a little bit quicker and not have to wait and stop to build a jump off course or change it for a jump off course? Is that the reason for them?
Yeah, they can, and a lot of riders like it because obviously the horses just jump one round generally, and then they can sort of go off again. So I think that a lot of riders are keen on them. I think, again, there's a few sort of different thoughts. I mean, as a course designer, sometimes, when you've got 7 classes and they're all single phase all day, and it's sort of like, it can become a little bit sort of challenging. And I think on the negative side is that when we touched a little bit earlier about sort of like a newcomer second round, when you're qualifying round single phase constantly, and then all of a sudden you then go to a show where you're sort of trying to qualify for the Horse of the Year show, you're then jumping 3 different rounds, and a lot more technicality. So
and your horses are like, what is going on here? I have to go in again, and then I have to go in again, and then I have to go in again.
They'll start thinking they're 3-day eventers.
Yes, 3 times.
Well, they're just used to it.
Yeah. No, it's just good. And I think, like I said, for show centres, sometimes we can have 120 in a class, and when you've got to jump off after that, that's pretty much a minimum of 2 hours jumping to start with. Then you jump off, and again, I mean, if you've got 120, you'd be looking at sort of 30 to 40, or wanting to get 30 to 40 through to the jump off anyway, particularly at novice level, and so that's another out, so one class, it can take sort of, 3.5 hours. So, I think there's obviously, again, a lot of young horses, riders don't want to sort of like get them off the lorry again once they've jumped. They want, put them back on the lorry, go home, sort of thing. So that sort of long waiting at shows. I think there's lots of pluses for it, and I think it sort of fits in, and I think now it's sort of being used internationally as well. I think it's got its place.
Do you jump off if you have a rail down in the first half? Like, do you keep going and do the speed round?
Yeah. So single phase, unless you're eliminated, you continue. Yeah.
Oh,
so the single phase or 2-phase special.
That would be a really good idea, because you don't get to do a jump off or practice a jump off or any turns unless you get into the second round when you're doing it the way we've been doing it all the time. So I actually think that would be a great opportunity to be able to, even if you have one down, just to be able to teach the young ones to turn up and get a bit more of a feel for doing a jump off later.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's absolutely. And that's why it sometimes does, like, even with some of my younger horses, that's exactly what I might use it for. And obviously I won't go fast in the jump off, but I might just take a little cheeky little line and quietly get them to sit on their horse and just practice some things. So yeah. So Paul, what's your favourite type of course to build?
My favourite type?
Someone said you can build any type of course for this show. Whether it's going to be a jump off class, or whether it's going to be a speed class, or whether it's going to be like a derby, or whether it's going to go eventing. What's your favourite?
I like A9, which is basically a 2-round competition. So it's very similar to an A7, but it's sort of jumped over 2 rounds. So you're guaranteed to sort of top 25% or top 5, depending on what ruling it's under. So you're going to get so many into the second round. So you can sort of build it, sort of like up to spec. So I think they use more of a top level in this country rather than a sort of a novice level. So that I quite like them, because again,
you don't see it that often.
No, it's mainly sort of like the county shows in the Stairways series and the 140, those sort of bigger classes. So I enjoy doing them.
Paul, is
I think,
that like a
again,
3.3.1 class? That's what we call it over here, and we run our World Cups under that rule?
Yeah, so you take the top so many through. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's ultimately like a jump off class, and then you take the top 25% or whatever's in the schedule, basically. But yes, we have the top 5 go through, or all clear rounds we have. But whereas the 3.3.1 is the top 25% will go through. But so it's good. I like those.
I tell you what, from coming from eventing, I had to learn a whole new language, and we use all of the point two, like
Yes.
not the A something descriptions. And I honestly was like, can someone just tell me how many rounds I need to do, and if I need to go fast in any of them? So getting the hang of it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a question I actually wanted to ask Paul about the 3-day events and the show jumping competitions, like, because you've built for both at top level. So what are the differences when you're building a show jumping course for eventing and a show jumping course for show jumping?
Be nice to
I
be
think, to be
inventors.
honest, now I don't think there's I don't think there's a lot of difference, to be honest. You know, I think the way years ago there was always, oh, it's an eventing course and this has to be done and that, you know. So generally, I think, yeah, no, I don't honestly think there's much of a difference, particularly at top level. I tend to do international eventing classes. I don't do national ones. And that's only because of the way it fits in to my sort of diary. So again, I think it's the same with anything. You have the rule book, so you're sort of governed a little bit on it can only be 10 or 11 fences, say, and 14 efforts, for example. And it can be a maximum height of 115, say, for a 2-star, that sort of thing. You know, so that is the same with the show jumping. You're sort of governed a little bit with how much you can do. So I think the only thing that does differ is the amount of fences. I mean, that's specific to, you know, each level of eventing. Whereas courses, you know, show jumping, you can have, if you want to, you can have 9 fences. If you want to, you can have 13 fences. It's not, you can have 3 doubles, a double and a combination. So that would probably be the only difference. But actually, how I design it, is there's not a lot of difference anymore. You know, I still sort of same principles, rhythm, balance, tempo, flowing, all that sort of exactly the same. You know, like a 4-star, 5-star. You know, I mean, like Burley, for example, you know, is on grass, so the ground does a little bit there for you. You can have a slightly downhill distance or a slightly uphill distance, so you put a level distance and it can ride completely different because of the gradient of the ground. So, but yeah, as in sort of like, do I do anything different? Not really. Not really. I mean, I might sort of think about, you know, like the ground if it's on grass, but then I would do the same with show jumping as well if it was on a grass arena. Excuse me. Yeah, so no.
And that's why Amanda has made such a good transition from eventing to show jumping.
It's been a challenge. It's been very fun, but it's actually really nice to sit on horses who want to keep the rails up, because I found that I was sort of analysing this after transitioning from the eventing to the show jumping and thinking, you know, why do we get so nervous? And I kind of thought, well, I think it's because you do one dressage test, one cross-country course, and then one show jumping, you know, track. And if you're at a championship event, you know, they always put it in reverse order. So they're building up this atmosphere, which is ridiculous. And then you've got to go and do this phase, and you only ever get one turn when you go to a show. Whereas at least when you're show jumping, you've got a few classes. So it's certainly a lot of eventers say they don't like the show jumping, which now I'm show jumping. I'm like, guys, it's actually not that hard.
Don't tell them that. They might all switch.
I think they're starting to get quite keen, actually. Paul, I wanted to actually, on the talking about how do you build differently, what are the main differences when you're building on, say, a grass surface to maybe a sand surface or a fibre surface? How do the distances change? So when you're building something, do you build any distances slightly differently depending on the surface that you're building on?
I think it, depending on whether it is grass, I mean, you know, grass or an arena. I mean, I'd probably say 90% of arenas now are, you know, they're good surfaces. Like if it's sand surfaces, we sort of like all weather type surfaces, that they're all flat. They're all good surfaces. And so I think from that point of view, you know, the distances can be, you don't have to worry too much about, you know, whether you want to ask for a forward distance, a slightly shorter distance, you know, and generally speaking, unless it's adverse weather, you know, those surfaces will stand up to pretty much all day. Some obviously ride a little bit deeper than others, some might, but again, so you take that into consideration when you're building sort of through the day. Grass, again, I think grass, a nice big grass arena, where you sort of like, I always sort of think about it as like you get up their neck a bit and you sort of like, come on, we've got a lovely arena here called Bicton Arena, and it's an amazing arena to build in and ride in. So, when you go there, you can be building forward distances. A lot of the classes that have in their main ring, would be sort of like sort of Fox or 120 and above. They have a lot of those sort of classes. So the speed is a little bit sort of like 375. So again, that sort of, you can build a little bit more forward in there. But again, if it was wet conditions, then you reduce the distances a little bit, maybe take a bit of spread off of the oxes, so that think about where the oxes are, in relation to the ground. So yes, I mean, sort of generally it would be, they'd be about the same, but you do take into consideration that sort of thing. But as I said, most arenas now are super surfaces, and sort of the grass arenas, like, we don't have many in this country anymore, but the ones that we do have are amazing.
I think the grass arena is so lovely when it's well done, isn't it? It's just beautiful, but it's frustrating as you go along the class, as the conditions get worse. And it's, especially like I said, from eventing, when they do reverse order, you think, oh God, if it's crappy footing and you're up the pointy end of the proceedings, it just seems a little bit not unfair, but it makes the job a lot harder, doesn't it?
Puts a bit of pressure on, doesn't it?
Yeah. Over here we've got these county shows, Amanda, and they're amazing, the county shows, and there's something that we actually really want to keep supporting. But I do always feel for the course builders, because you just don't know what's going to happen on the day, because you've got to enter so far in advance for the classes, and you can get there and the ground might be hard, or it might be too wet, and then I think course builders have to keep changing where the fences are. And do you find that at all, Paul, that you might have to actually adapt your course, like we talked about adapting your courses, but do you ever actually have to completely change it just because of the going, of something that you've got in your mind of what you're going to do, and then the going changes because of the weather, and then you have to actually move all the fences?
Yeah, definitely. So like the bigger shows, like Burley, Hickstead, those course plans are done months in advance. Because basically you have to order all your fences, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Sometimes it comes down to sponsors. Sponsors might want a fence in the, like, which you didn't know about, so you have to put that in a position, like Burley, for example, and obviously that's TV coverage, so you have to work with the TV crew, and where you wanted a combination. Like it might be in the wrong shot or something like that, so you might change that. But they're sort of like slightly different reasons. But yes, I did a show a few years ago now, and basically all I can say is that the heavens opened, and it was just like it was just like a quag. It was really not nice. But we had we still had an area trial to jump. So basically it was like the course plan went out the window, and we said, right, we'll take some poles in. We dropped the pole, moved to the next fence, found a bit of ground, dropped the pole, moved to the next fence, dropped the pole, and basically that's that's the only way we could do it. But generally the sort of like the shows that Bex is talking about, we would plan them quite well in advance, and then adjust as we need to with the weather conditions. Or you could have a display that goes in before you, which basically trashes the ground where the combination's going to go. So it can be sort of literally you go in and you think, but generally you can move it slightly left or slightly right, or take a stride out, or but again, it's so the county shows are lovely. They're really, really good in this country, and they're super to go to, they're super to build at. But there's lots of outside influences that basically can make a lot of changes.
So I think it's fair to say you've got to be adaptable as a course builder.
Yes.
And then And then how, Paul, would the courses differ? So when you're building for like a table A versus a table C, I've noticed when I'm doing some of the speed rounds, and I'm not jumping. Well, I've done a little bit of World Cup, but then I'm looking at more sort of 110s and 120s. That I see a lot of quite thin oxes, so they're not particularly wide. So can you tell us what you would build and the distances you would build for like a table A versus a speed class?
So I think the first thing is that to sort of remember is a table A is first and foremost is a jumping class, and whereas a table C is a speed class. So that sort of, I think some people do get a little bit confused with it. We have like a what we call an A4, which is one round against the clock. So again, the same internationally, we have one round, but they table C is seconds added. So they're sort of like the courses for table A would be much more like, for the jump off part, it might be an inside line, but that's up to the riders if they want to take that. But the route would be around a particular fence, whereas the table C, you might deliberately say, well, actually the turn is inside. I think, again, like you mentioned about taking a little bit of width off the oxes. I mean, sometimes if you're going to turn up to an oxer, or turn away, particularly in the table C, again, the width doesn't want to be too wide because you don't want people turning up to it and then the horse landing on the back rail unnecessarily. And again, you don't want to like a hard turn after an oxer in a table C, because again, you sort of like you don't want to be sort of sending the horse out over an oxer and then all of a sudden like hanging left or right on landing. So that's sort of why we do that.
Oh, and it's face-offs to turn.
Yes. But yeah, distances again, I mean, there'd probably be a little bit more forward in a table C, not necessarily, whereas a table A, you might be asking for a forward stride, you might be asking for a slightly shorter stride, whereas a table C, I wouldn't do that. I would just keep the distance to a sensible distance for that particular line in that table C class. I wouldn't put a short or a long distance in deliberately. I'd keep it level,
keep it long,
but on the forward side.
The level.
Yeah, interesting. And what about like, where do you add spooky fill? How do you choose where you put it and what you use?
I would always try and avoid it, if I'm really honest, because I don't like stopping horses. So that would be my sort of like philosophy, particularly at sort of a novice level. I mean, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't put a fence in, which does require a little bit of precision, if you like. Sometimes you get a sponsor fence and the sponsor's like, well, I bought this fence and I really like it, and you might use it and you think, well, actually it didn't look spooky, but it was spooky. But that could just be because the horse has not been in that arena before and the horses have seen it or haven't seen it. But again, I think if I was to use something that was a little bit spooky, that like sometimes a viaduct wall, a little viaduct wall can be a little bit spooky. I probably wouldn't use it in a combination. I'd use it maybe sort of going towards home under a vertical, something like that, rather than an oxer going into all coming out of a double combination sort of thing. But again, I would always be thinking like, okay, I don't want horses to stop. That would be my initial sort of thought on it. But again, when you go up the grades, sometimes at a higher level, you put things in, maybe put a set of planks in. Sometimes now, sets of planks which are very full are sort of quite common. And they can be a little bit spooky sometimes with the fillers. Just having one filler under a fence and then quite open on the other side, that sort of thing. But I try and avoid anything that I know is spooky, or going to create sort of a horse to spook. I mean, sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes they go in and they just spook at something. You think, well, where did that come from? And that can be something as simple as like the timing. Yeah. So again, I try and sort of, I'm quite aware of where the timers go, where the sort of flowers would be positioned. So again, having equally like a water tray, If you've got a Liverpool on the back of a vertical, for example, the chances are if you're going to pass it, a horse could look at it from like either side going towards another fence. So it could be that's made the horse spook at the fence, not the actual fence. So I think positioning of things like that would be also on my sort of like radar, if you like.
Yeah. So I suppose there's that sort of balance of being able to introduce the spooky things so that by the time the horses are in the main arenas that they're used to all that stuff versus get them jumping confidently when they're younger, I guess.
Yeah, and I think if you have, like I said, I think we've got a couple of sort of fences that are sort of like a little viaduct wall, and they're sort of just they're sort of like not a big wall, but they're sort of two little walls. So again, I mean, you can put them on the side of the fence, so that the horses get used to seeing them in the arena. I wouldn't sort of like, I'd always have something in the arena. So another place we built out, they've got some pandas. So I try and sort of get them in the arena so that the horses have
the pandas in charge. Oh my god!
Really?
The horse always
massive
pandas, and it's amazing how much.
Yeah, but they actually jump
and
them
they're
really
all
well.
Kind of painted different cool colours.
Yeah,
sounds terrifying.
They jump them really well. They do jump them. But again, if I was going to jump them, I'd have them in the arena so that the horses they've been in the arena as an island or something like that. So again, there's ways of introducing it, and I'm not a believer in sort of like no fillers and stuff like that. I think at sort of novice level, sensible fillers, sensible ladders, little planks, so that when they horses do have to jump them at a higher level, they're not suddenly like, oh, there's a Liverpool that I've never seen before, and excuse me. I think so. I try and introduce them, like I said, under a vertical, going towards home, later on in the course, that sort of thing, so that they're sort of in a sensible position. Whereas in a sort of like a, like you say, you mentioned county shows. I mean, I think, sort of like being aware of what's around, banners in the background, like white poles blending in with a white tent sort of thing. It's something that we sort of learn and we pick up on over the years, and it needs to be taken into consideration.
I know what question I've got for you, Paul. So what is it with red fences or black fences? Do horses generally have a favour of them?
I think any sort of like plain colour, I think any plain colour is harder for a horse to jump. So the less white on it, the harder it is, and that's because again the way horses see things. Red is I think the easiest way to say it is like horses are like red-green colourblind. That's probably the easiest way of describing it. So if you look at the way horses would see something, like that's how. So again, green, plain green fences, plain red, plain black. Black is obviously quite a dominant colour, so they see that. But again, it's like because it's black, so it's that sort of garish. The other one that is yellow. I think if you're sort of having plain yellow poles and things like that, that can cause a problem. But generally speaking, anything the less white in it, the harder it is for the horse to focus on it. So again, if you look at going up through, I would always try and have I try not to use too many plain colour fences. In sort of like the more novice classes, whereas sort of when you get to sort of like a higher level, again, it's part of the test. And that sort of like we were saying earlier, sometimes just I always call it a toolkit, and like at novice level, you just use basically the course specifications and what material you've got sensibly. And then probably the next 120 level, you might start to use a few distance questions, but again, sensible, and sort of bring in some plain colours, that sort of thing. And then when you get to sort of 140 level, you might be using more distance questions, short and long distances, more colour, more sort of different materials, sort of more delicate fences. So I think, you know, we've all got that in our sort of kit, if you like, and then it's when we would use those. But I think generally, red is definitely because of the way horses see things, and that's a completely different sort of like sort of like talk really. But I think there's so much now. There's so much now on you know, the way horses see things, and there's been so much research done on it. And you know, if you think, you know, their peripheral vision and their binocular vision and contrasts, and you know, it's quite amazing. I quite enjoy it, and sort of looking at that sort of thing. And I've got something on my phone, and it's basically a simulator thing, and you can put it on a subject, and it shows you how like diachromatic and trichromatic and things like that.
Oh wow!
It's quite a good way. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's
Oh.
only like I said. I mean,
Oh,
I think
Yeah.
cool.
yeah. So you can sort of see how they see things, but white obviously is dominant. But anything sort of red, green, sort of like the colorblind bit. Like I said, it's the easiest way. I'm not I'm not a vet or anything like that, but that's the easiest way I've learned over the years to actually understand how horses see colors and stuff.
Yep. That's absolutely fascinating, because as a rider, to know that and to be able to work out if there's something that is spooky and why it's spooky, whether it's a lack of depth perception because the rails are plain. But that reminds me, do you remember at Tokyo, there was that fence, and they used it in obviously the straight show jumping and the eventing, and they were all having it down. It was a red blending into orange and yellow oxa, and it had those 3 coloured balls below it. It was like red, yellow, orange, and the rail was like red until 2/3 of the way across, and then it faded into like an orangey yellow, and so it was kind of a little almost one-sided, and a lot of them were having it down. And I think I messaged one of our good course designers, and like, tell me about this jump with the balls. Why are they all having it down? And it was really interesting. He was talking about the colour and the shading like that as well.
Yeah, pastels. If you look at sort of like pastel-y colours and things, it's quite interesting. And like I said, I think like that particular, I don't remember the fence, to be honest, but I sort of like similar fences, because obviously after the Olympics we tend to sort of get given a lot of the fences that they've used, so we have a lot of those sort of fences. But yeah. So I mean, Chard again, they've got the old Rio wall, which is quite, we don't jump it an awful lot. But yeah, that's orange.
Yeah, that is.
But
and the red post box at Heartbreak.
The red post box. Yeah, that's part of that is again because of the so that's like a 3 meter fence as well. So again, when you sort of think about some things, like 12 meter, 3.6 poles, against sort of 3 meters. So again, that's more of a challenge itself. And the post box, I think, again, because of the sides of it, that sort of plays a part. So there's lots of sort of factors, but we've got one at Heartbreak which we use, which we can use, which is like what we call mafia poles, which are sort of like horizontal lines instead of like the vertical lines. And that sort of that can cause.
It's amazing how it has all come on, because back in the day, if you look back to the 60s, everything was red and white and blue and white striped poles, and now these horizontal poles, you've got the horizontal lines, spirals, and different colours that you've got. Kind of, it's come on so much, and I'm sure the poles are probably a bit lighter, the cups are a little bit shallower, the course designing itself, I mean, I'm sure now is a lot more technical than what it was back then. And that, I suppose, is probably because of the quality of horses, could I say?
Yeah, I think definitely, like if you look at the way horses are bred now, they're athletes, aren't they? They're bred to be athletes. Training, coaching, there's an awful lot sort of more goes into it. And I think that's all across the world. I think that's not just the UK, but I think the way horses are bred, and particularly that they're bred as athletic horses, and that doesn't mean to say that every horse that jumps in the ring is the same, but I think the coaching, the training, all of that has come on leaps and bounds over the years, and there's a lot more emphasis on training and you know, and again, to me as a sort of a coach, I think you've got to, you know, whatever you do, you know, you're doing, which is what we sort of touched on earlier. If you're riding a 20-meter circle, when you go in the ring, you know, one fence on a curve to another fence is on a like a half 20-meter circle arc onto a straight line normally. You know, so that's a movement that you would do in your dressage test. There's a movement you would do in your training. You know, so again, I think now there's that much more relationship between, you know, it's not us and them, you know, it's about a big sort of a team, if you like, and, you know, everybody's sort of in it, you know, for the horse welfare and, you know, basically sort of to watch, you know, enjoy the sport. Yeah.
I got to walk the jumping track at Herning. And I mean, I was blown away because it was massive and the distances are all huge, but there was just, it's mind blowing. And then what just was fascinating was that the amount of stuff going on in the arena, and then the crowd was like, and so we don't have this in Australia, but the crowd, it was like going to an international soccer match. They were just completely off their dial. And some of these horses just walk out on a loose rein. Whereas I was like, oh my God, there is so much to look at. How can you even concentrate on the little rail when all of this other stuff's going on? So they're pretty amazing creatures at that level, aren't they?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I think they've gone, you know, I think the journey that they've gone on to get to that point, you know, has sort of taught them, you know, educated them as well. Do you know what I mean? So I think they've, you know, I think when you sort of start like as that 4-year-old class and, you know, you progress up to that, you would have, like Bex was saying earlier, you sort of like you qualify at your local show and then you go to your second round show and you go to your Hoys and your championship show, you know, and then you sort of go on from there and then you do your county circuit. So, you know, it takes a long time for them to get to that point. But I think you know you're right. I mean, you know, like particularly. I mean, I was at the London Olympics, luckily enough, and you know the crowd there was amazing. But the horses come in and they just—it
would have been crazy.
Yeah, it was lovely. Yeah.
You being a course designer, Paul, and if you're looking at all these young course designers coming up beneath you, you've got somebody who's aspiring to want to go to these big shows. They want to build around the world at these international competitions. What characteristics do you think really shine through, and what kind of things do you look for when assessing up and coming course designers?
I think again, I think when you sort of like have like people with you as trainees and things like that, you get quite a good idea, sort of like their understanding of the sport, understanding of the way horses go. You know, some of them aren't involved in training and stuff like that, but you know, they might be involved in the horses themselves in one way or another. You know, so I think, you know, it's having that sort of, I look for sort of like, you know, how do people approach it? You know, what are they sort of, what do they want to put in the course and things like that. And that's sort of like, you know, we all sort of say the same, but sometimes I think you get a good feeling, you know, have they got a feeling for it? You know, do they want to sort of like progress because it's their passion, or do they want to progress because it's just something to do? You know, I would probably say nearly all the people that I've assessed have wanted to do it because they're passionate about the sport. They want to enjoy it. You know, so I think, you know, like looking to see whether they've got a feel for it. You know, and by that I mean the same. I keep going back to this 20-meter circle, but I think it's the easiest way of describing things. You know, do they put fences on a 20-meter circle, or are they expecting horses to turn on 10 meters sort of thing? You know, and, you know, thinking about that flowing, keeping everything flowing, you know, balance, rhythm, you know, and that sort of comes in at every level, you know, and particularly when sort of younger course builders, if you like, or being assessed, you know, they sort of build at a lower level. So again, I think it's looking to see whether they've got that understanding of how that fence can ride in relation to the next fence. You know, again, making sure that it's, you know, thinking of keeping it along the figure of 8 lines. You know, but if somebody started to put lots of rollbacks in or turnbacks, you know, a novice level, you know, I'd probably question why they were doing that, and if they came up with we're looking to test horse and rider, because it's not just about whether the horse can jump a fence, it's about testing sort of horses and riders, you know, and sort of that sort of thing. So yeah, I could keep going on and on. I love it. I love that sort of side of it.
I was going to say, how much influence does does it have if the course designer has been a rider? So if they're a higher level rider, does that make them naturally a little bit more in tune with how to build a better course, or does it really not matter? Is it just about the feel that that person has, irrespective of their riding career?
I think there is a few course designers that haven't ridden and things, and they're top course designers, but I think generally
Mm-hmm.
most people that are in it have got some sort of some involvement with horses of some description. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any that have no sort of no involvement with horses at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think actually I think it does help. Like I said, I've ridden, so I always think, would I ride that line? Would I want to ride that? When I've sort of built a course, I think, would I
Mm-hmm.
do that? Would I ride that? So it helps me. But I think
Yeah.
I don't think it's that or as important as having the fit, having understanding and feel. I think, if somebody's got if they've
Feel.
got a bit of empathy and a
Mm-hmm.
bit of feel, and that sort of figure of eight, again, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's, I mean, I think I have quite a lot of people help me over the years and still do, and I would probably say that
Mm-hmm.
some of the riders will come in and help at the end of a day, and they say things like, "We had no idea that you thought like that." And that sort of top riders, they sort of
Wow.
say,
Yeah.
"We had no idea that sort of went into it, and you were thinking like that," or So it's quite interesting sometimes when you get sort of some riders come in and help.
100%. Even from a conversation that we have had today, I didn't realize there was so much that goes into looking at a course for the novices or looking for a
Mm,
course for the older horses. And I know there is technicality that goes into it, and I have ultimate respect for all these course
mm,
builders out there. But with what you're saying, with teaching younger people coming through and having a
mm,
natural feel and the empathy, I think you've kind of explained that you can teach this. Is it like, if you have a rider that doesn't have any feel, but if
mm,
they work hard enough, they will be
mm.
able to learn that skill. Whereas a course builder that has a natural feel might find it a bit easier
Mm.
to build those
That's
courses.
interesting.
Yeah.
So moving on from that, Paul, how does that influence the way that, because obviously you're a level 5
Mm-hmm.
coach as well. So how do you feel your role as a course designer? How does that influence your role as a coach and vice versa?
I think as a coach, I the way I would sort of be very much about sort of like exercises and canter poles and things like that. But I when I sort of coach, I always sort of say, like, this is how you sort of do it in the ring, if you like, and then I go over
Mm,
a lot of the basic stuff because I'm a believer, in foundation. And I think if you've
mm,
got the foundations, and the way I said, if you've got good foundations, the roof stays on longer. If you don't have a very good foundation, the roof might
Yeah.
stay on for a year or two, but then it drops off. And I think,
yeah.
um, being
Yeah.
able to sort of like have the understanding I do of the course design side, and I think
Mm,
it does help. And a lot of the people that I have coached in the past have sort of like, um, they've sort of taken into a lot of consideration, sort of like what we do in training is
mm,
what, I mean, you what I do in training, I wouldn't not do in the ring, if you like, and vice versa.
mm,
And I think,
mm,
Yeah.
I mean, I very rarely
Yeah.
jump big fences at home with my sort of client, pupils, clients. And I think,
Mm.
it's about sort of gymnastic and, making sure that the rhythm is there, and sort of like, like a basic exercise, sort of 6, 7, 8 strides down a distance, 6, 7, 8 on a curve to the left and to the right, sort of thing. Because in the jump
mm-hmm.
off you might want to go 6, it might be 7 strides, walk 7 strides, but in the jump off you want 6 strides. In the you might had a little tricky jump, so
Mm.
you want to go 8. So it's like being able to have that adjustment, you know, but the level distance centre to centre is 7 strides, for example, but you've got to be able to adjust. You know, again, you look at some people when they're walking courses, they walk every stride from start to finish, you know, and they'll walk 10, 11 strides around a curve, you know, you know, but I think it's about sort of having that balance.
And what you're saying about walking like 10, 11 strides, that's actually something that I've picked up and started to do, because I listened to, I can't remember what it was that I listened to, but saying then you've got a good idea of how you're doing on time as well. So if I've walked like an 8 or 9 stride and I've realised I've gone down there on 10, I'm thinking, oh, I need to get my bum into gear and pick it up a pace, otherwise I'm going to get time for
That's 2 seconds effectively.
So no, I think that is all really interesting.
And like, Paul, what gives you the most satisfaction in the role, and like, what are the most challenging aspects that you find?
Challenging, I think.
Maybe riders that don't like your courses.
Yeah, I think sometimes.
I know.
I think weather's probably the biggest one. To be honest, to be fair, weather is probably the biggest one, particularly wind.
True.
I mean, rain you can deal with, but wind, if you know, like you can't put a plank on top, or you know, you've got to change, turn the fillers over, turn the cups over, stuff like that. Sometimes wind can be. I think rain, you know, yes, we don't like the rain, but generally speaking, you know, rain is rain. The horses are working in rain, you're working in it. Whereas if you get a gust of wind and a wing falls down as a horse is approaching, sort of thing, you know, so that would be the biggest challenge, I would think, like would be the weather. And the rewards, I love watching young horses, particularly over a 2 or 3 day show, because you sort of see them sort of like, you know, on the first day, and then you see them on the third day, for example, and then you think, oh, wow, you know, they've come on, or you know, and sort of like I enjoy watching the horses and the riders, you know, jump the fences, and sort of like you think, oh yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that sort of thing. But yeah, so that would be my rewarding bit.
Yeah, it's definitely a job satisfaction there, isn't it? Watching the horses progress and knowing that you've been filled for that. You know? And you can tell often when the courses have been built by a fabulous course builder like yourself, because they do just flow for these young horses and encouraging them to, you know, grow in confidence. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give you some quick fire questions, Paul. So these are ones that we've just started to bring in at the end of the podcast. Okay, it's just a little bit of fun. You can just answer in a couple of questions, in a couple of words, or whatever you feel. But it's just to get a little feel for who you are as a horseman, really. So here's some quick fire questions for you. So would you prefer a stallion, gelding, or mare?
Stallion.
Oh, we haven't had anyone say that.
No.
I find, well, I can do it straight out, but yeah, I like stallions because I think you can work with a stallion, you know, and I think once you've got them, like basically, I like stallions. Up until the last couple of years, I've always had stallions,
Wow, that's so interesting, Paul. I had no idea. Is there one thing you think every horse owner should know?
Horses put their trust in you.
Oh, that's fabulous
really
answer.
Interesting. Yeah.
Fabulous answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your favourite discipline?
Show jumping.
Thank you.
Qualified dressage.
No, not dressage. No.
I was on my edge of my seat there waiting. What is something you love about working in the equestrian industry?
I think it's enjoyable, and I think it's rewarding. So I think that sort of, you know, I think it's very rewarding and enjoyable.
Awesome.
Love it. And this is an interesting one, which I'm looking forward to hearing your answer. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, believe it or not, a biochemist.
What?
Yes.
Why?
Well, that's off the other scale.
That's off the chart, isn't it?
Say. Yeah, completely off the charts. Did you up until what age did you actually?
Horses took over.
Yeah.
So when I was at school, basically, I did all the sciences and everything else, and I really enjoyed it. And then horses took over. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God. I would never have guessed that as an answer. I would have guessed a million things before then.
Totally.
Yeah.
What is something you wish you knew before starting your career in the equestrian industry?
Yeah, I think if I didn't, again, it's a difficult one because it's like there's so many different things. But if I'd known how enjoyable it was, how enjoyable the course building was or designing, then I probably would have done it before a long time ago.
Oh,
Yeah, wow.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting and really nice to hear as well.
Yeah.
That you've got into something you absolutely love and adore, and you're like, yeah, well, there's some advice for people. Don't wait. Just get stuck in.
Yeah, if you enjoy it, get on with it.
And what's your favourite non-horse related hobby?
Swimming.
It's a bit chilly in England for that.
I know we don't have a sea or lakes, or is it cold water swimming?
Yeah, so like just swimming. Yeah, so if I was to go and do something, it would be I'd go swimming.
Oh.
I just like it. So when we go on holiday and stuff,
Wow.
And what's the greatest lesson you've learned from your career?
Teamwork, I think. Like without a good team behind you, and wherever you are, whatever you're doing, teamwork, I think.
Yeah, that is so true, isn't it? And you've learned the value of teamwork after you've tried to do it yourself all this time, and then suddenly you realise that it can be so much more enjoyable with a great team too, to share it with people, huh?
Yeah.
That is so interesting, Paul. So basically we've learned incredible stuff about course building, and that you wanted to be a biochemist and that you swim in cold water all the time. So, I think that is such an interesting, varied lot of things that we've just learned, and it's been wonderful. So thank you so much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
And unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. But this has been the Equestrian Experience with myself, Amanda Ross, my co-host, Bex Mason, and this episode's guest, Paul Connor. To send in your questions for our up-and-coming episodes, enter our competitions and access our other episodes, be sure to visit the equestrianexperiencepodcast.com. You can also follow us at Amanda Ross Equestrian and at Bex Mason SJ. So until next time, everybody have a great equestrian experience. And again, Paul, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Thank you.